How do we get to the point where so many young women today think to be free is to go to college, get a great degree, have a fantastic job, and be as sexually free as possible? How did those get joined together? Well, that was the question that people began to ask me after I had left Cosmo, and I began to investigate it. You have to understand a bit about how propaganda works. Propaganda isn't just a bunch of lies. People think, oh, propaganda, I can spot it in a minute because it's just a bunch of lies. No, propaganda is very sophisticated. It's half-truth, selected truth, and truth out of context is used not to sell just products. It's also used to sell ideas. The feminist movement and the sexual revolution were two radically different movements. The feminist movement was fighting for equal opportunity for women in education and the workforce. The sexual revolution was fighting for all sorts of sexual freedoms. Cosmo, we pretended that this sexual revolution was a freedom for women. It actually was not. It was actually kind of a slavery. But we pretended it was freedom for women. And over time, as the sexual revolution and the women's movement got identified closer and closer together, a lot of women began to buy into that illusion. I wrote for Cosmo for about 20 years. I came out of J School, University of Missouri School of Journalism. I was trained very well to be a good reporter, and then I immediately fell from grace and started writing lies for Cosmopolitan magazine. I was fascinated with Cosmo, and I was fascinated with glamour and sophistication, and I always said I didn't want to be a big fish in a small pond. I wanted to be a small fish in a big pond. And Cosmo was, to me, was that big pond, and I was the little fish. Helen Gurley Brown was the editor of Cosmo. She's the one that took Cosmo and turned it from a general interest magazine into a sex rag.
It's a magazine to help this young woman realize dreams, hopes, ambitions, to help her find a man, keep a man, get him back if he's going, get a new one if he left.
Helen Gurley Brown had created a list of rules on how to write for Cosmo, and some of those rules included how to make up stories. So here's one of them. Unless you are a recognized authority on a subject, profound statements must be attributed to somebody appropriate, even if the writer has to invent the authority. Here's another one. Try to locate some of the buildings, restaurants, nightclubs, parks, streets, as well as entire case histories in cities other than New York, even if you deliberately have to plant them elsewhere. Most writers live in New York. 92% of our readers do not. They had a book. They would go in and have a meeting of all the editors once a week, and they'd all bring in ideas, and then they'd put them in the book. The freelance writers would come in and choose the stories that they wanted to do. These did not come out of reality. These came out of the heads of the editors who said, oh, that would be an interesting story. And that's how you got assignments. I had married my husband in college, and right after college we went to Los Angeles, and I worked for a newspaper out there. Almost immediately after I got this job, I ended up pregnant. See, I was very delighted with it. The newspaper was not so delighted with it, and at that time you were fired for being pregnant. And they told me I could only work 5 months into my pregnancy, and then I had to quit. That did turn me into a feminist. Then I found out, of course, there were other things that women were being discriminated against in those days. Now, this was 1969. A married woman could not apply for credit in her own name. There were help wanted ads, help wanted male and help wanted female. Women couldn't go to law school or medical schools in many cases. So there was a lot of discrimination going on, and that is why so many women of my generation identified with the feminist movement. Betty Friedan, she and a number of women had gotten together and started the National Organization for Women. Again, they were fighting for equal opportunity for women in education and the workforce. It's very well documented that the abortion movement was originally a man's movement, an upper middle class white man's movement. But there was a man, and there were actually two men, who were fighting to get abortion legalized in America. These two men knew Betty Friedan very well, and they worked very hard to try to convince her to insert abortion in the women's movement's political Bill of Rights. The media were not in that room that night. That was a closed-door meeting. Then Betty Friedan, the next Monday, she has a press conference, and she tells them that she's speaking for all American women everywhere. And the Washington Post bought it. They headlined the abortion vote. They said essentially, all women want this. And that is how propaganda works. The feminists who bought into the abortion notion of my generation, well, think about it. They wanted to keep their jobs, but should women today really, in this climate, really have to choose between their job or their child? It's outrageous. Why was I pro-choice for years? Partly because I was going to be fired for being pregnant. I thought that was my only choice. When you start betraying the truth, it will come back to haunt you. It will get you in the end. And that's why, even though I knew we were making up all these stories, I still got sucked in and thought abortion would be okay. Well, it wasn't okay. My husband wanted to join the Catholic Church, and I said, I'm not going to join that patriarchal old church. And then I read the Catechism. This was not the nasty old Catholic Church I'd heard about. This was about joy and freedom and love and beauty and forgiveness and all of the things. I went to the priest. I was terrified. My knees were shaking going into that confessional, because I was going to tell him about that abortion. And I did. And he was just so wonderful. And he said, go home and think about how much God loves you. So I did. It was the most beautiful thing, and I was healed from it. Why all of this hijacking of the women's movement? Money, money. Why was COSMO so successful? Because it attracted advertisers. Why did it attract advertisers? Because it worked. When a young woman, an insecure young woman, reads these magazines and thinks that she has to have perfume, cosmetics, hair products, beautiful clothes, singles travel, abortions, contraception. When she thinks she has to have all of these things, she's going to spend a lot of money. What these magazines are doing, and what now the internet and everywhere, turning a woman into a commodity. She's got this picture of herself on herself. It's all about me. If you can convince a woman that everything is about her, then she has to buy a whole bunch of stuff to make herself so wonderful. If inside she knows who she is, she doesn't need all that stuff. Now there's the other side of it. I say we're all liberated. Are we? So on one hand, yes, we can go to college, we can get a degree, we can be doctors, lawyers, engineers, we can do all this stuff, we can make all this money. But how liberated are we if our girls have got that in their pocket? Before they can even think. People think that we've got mothers who want to stay at home and feminists who want to work. No, the real battle in our nation is between feminists who are for abortion and feminists who know the difference and are against it. There is such a thing as pro-life feminism, and that in fact, pro-life feminism is the authentic feminism of the 21st century. Obviously, I don't want to take more credit than I deserve for all this evil. but I think that I was certainly part of the evil empire, if you will. And what I would like for it to come out is for young women today to tell them the truth so they could see how my generation got it wrong, why we got it wrong, and how they can do better, how your generation can do better. They're telling you, on the one hand, be yourself. On the other hand, they're saying, you're not good enough the way you are. Buy all this stuff to be beautiful. Why aren't you beautiful just the way you are? Here's the perfume. Oh yeah, you stink too. Oh, by the way, your hands don't look very nice either, and your hair color is wrong. Oh, and when you're tired of hearing about that, have some ice cream and a little booze to go with it, because then you'll be too fat and then we'll have to put you on a diet.